the man who united China. The tragic life of Qin Shi Huang. He built an empire that shaped East Asian civilization for over 2,000 years. He ended 5 centuries of endless bloody civil wars, tearing ancient China apart. He invented an unprecedented royal title for himself, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of unified China. And yet, his dynasty collapsed just 3 short years after his sudden death. Who exactly was Yingzheng? A cold, ruthless tyrant who crushed millions under harsh labor and brutal laws. A forward-thinking visionary who laid the permanent foundation of Chinese identity, or a permanently lonely man betrayed by nearly everyone he trusted, from childhood exile to his final breath? Today, we walk through the complete life of the most divisive, controversial emperor in Chinese history. Chapter 1. Traumatized Childhood. A hostage, trapped in enemy Zhao. Qin Shi Huang, born Yingzheng in 259 BCE, entered the world inside Zhao. Zhao, a hostile rival kingdom of Qin. Back then, the land we now call China was split into 7 warring states. All 7 fought non-stop, raiding villages, slaughtering soldiers, and competing for total control. Chaos was the only constant. Yingzheng's fate was sealed the day he was born. His father, Zichu, served as a royal political hostage, locked inside Zhao's capital. When full-scale war erupted between Qin and Zhao, his father fled secretly back to Qin. He abandoned the 7-year-old boy and his mother without a second thought. For 7 long years, Yingzheng lived in constant hiding. Local Zhao nobles hated all Qin blood. He faced daily humiliation, constant death threats, and crippling fear. Death lingered around every single corner. This agonizing exile carved his core personality forever. He learned early, no human being could ever be fully trusted. He learned survival demanded silence, endless patience, and total, absolute control over everything around him. At age 9, he finally escaped Zhao and returned to the Qing royal court. But relief never arrived. Qin's native nobles looked down on the exiled hostage boy. They shut him out of power, ignored his existence, and questioned his royal legitimacy. He clung tightly to the harsh lesson he learned in hiding. Wait, plan, strike without mercy when the perfect chance arrives. Chapter 2. 13 years of silence. Betrayal in the Qin palace. At only 13 years old, Yingzheng inherited the Qin throne. But the crown was nothing more than an empty symbol. All real state power rested in the hands of Lu Buwei. Lu Buwei, a former wealthy merchant turned powerful prime minister. To make matters far worse, his own mother dragged the royal house into a devastating scandal. She took a secret lover named Lao Ai, and they even had 2 illegitimate infant sons together. Lao Ai plotted a full military rebellion, his goal to overthrow Yingzheng and place his own child on the Qing throne. For 10 long years, the young king suppressed all rage and stayed perfectly silent. He watched every faction's hidden moves, endured endless public humiliation, and quietly built a loyal private force of allies. The second he turned 22 and held his official royal coronation, he struck without hesitation. Lao Ai's rebellion was crushed completely. Lao Ai and all his followers were publicly executed. His 2 half-brothers, the rival royal heirs, were killed to eliminate all future threats. His mother was locked under permanent house arrest. Finally, Lu Buwei was pressured to take his own life. In one single brutal political purge, Yingzheng erased every enemy standing in his path. But the cost was irreparable. After endless betrayal from his father, his mother, his prime minister, and his stepfigure, he lost the ability to trust any living soul. From that day forward, a lonely guarded ruler replaced the vulnerable boy from Zhao. Chapter 3. 10-Year Conquest. Unify all 6 warring kingdoms. With full unchallenged control of Qin in his grasp, Yingzheng set his single ultimate life goal: unite the entire war-torn Chinese mainland. He followed the timeless military strategy: befriend distant kingdoms while attacking nearby rivals one by one. The decade-long conquest unfolded step by step. First, Han, the weakest state, fell to Qin troops. Second, Zhao resisted fiercely. Qin defeated its legendary general, Li Mu, through a mix of spy sabotage and overwhelming military force, then seized all Zhao territory. Third, Wei collapsed when Qing soldiers diverted river water to flood its fortified capital city. Fourth, Qu, Qin's strongest rival, was conquered by a massive army of 600,000 soldiers. Fifth, Yan's last stand arrived, with Jinqi's famous failed assassination attempt on Yingzheng. Sixth, Qi surrendered without sending a single soldier to fight. By 221 BCE, 5 centuries of unbroken civil war finally ended. For the first time in recorded history, all these scattered states merged into one unified territory. Yingzheng created an unprecedented royal title to mark this historic milestone: Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. Military conquest was only the very beginning of his civilization revolution. Chapter 4. Reforms that shaped China for 2,000 years. Qin Shi Huang designed permanent systems to lock national unity in place for thousands of years. First, he completely abolished the old feudal noble system. No more inherited regional power for wealthy aristocrats. Every local governor, every regional official, was appointed directly by the emperor himself. This rule eliminated the risk of independent warlords splitting the empire apart again. Second, he standardized every single part of daily life across the whole realm. One unified written script so people from distant regions could communicate. One official currency to simplify nationwide trade. Universal weights and measurements for fair taxation and market exchange. Matching cart axle widths so all carriages could travel smoothly on imperial roads. Third, he built a massive network of stone imperial highways. These roads connected every corner of his empire for fast troop movement, trade transport, and royal inspection tours. Fourth, northern border defense. 300,000 Qin troops defeated the nomadic Xiongnu raiders. He linked separate defensive walls, built by northern kingdoms long before his reign, to construct the early prototype of the Great Wall we know today. Fifth, southern territorial expansion. His armies conquered the Yue tribes in the south. He ordered the Ling Canal built to connect river systems for military supply and farmland irrigation. Every single one of these reforms formed the core framework of Chinese civilization that endured for over 2 millennia. But every historic achievement came with an unbearable human cost. Chapter 5. The heavy price of unity, national burden, strict governance, and obsession with immortality. Millions of common people were drafted for long-term public construction across the empire. They worked non-stop throughout the seasons, expanding border defenses, constructing massive national road systems, building royal architectural complexes, and developing the enormous underground imperial mausoleum. His final resting place is famously protected by the world-renowned Terracotta Army. thousands of full-scale clay warriors, carefully crafted to stand guard over him in the afterlife. This grand burial design shows his lifelong pursuit of complete order and protection, even beyond mortal life. The Qin national system followed extremely strict and standardized rules. Every citizen was held accountable for even small mistakes. High annual public levies consumed most family resources. For ordinary people, daily life was filled with pressure and hardship during this era. The well-known book-burning event is often misunderstood in modern storytelling. Qin Shi Huang primarily removed scattered records that challenged national unification or glorified the old divided regional regimes. All practical books about medical treatment, agricultural techniques, and hands-on craftsmanship were fully retained and passed down. Even with these exceptions, his governing principle was clear. The newly unified empire required consistent and unified cultural order. In his later years of reign, one deep inner worry occupied his entire mind: the fear of leaving his newly built empire behind after his passing. Growing up in constant danger and instability as a royal hostage, he deeply feared the collapse of the unified nation he has spent his whole life establishing. He became extremely focused on seeking long-term life preservation methods. He organized large maritime expeditions, sending fleets across distant waters to search for legendary sacred substances that were believed to extend life. All of these expeditions ended with no success. These long-distance missions consumed huge national funds, mobilized massive numbers of workers, and exhausted many public resources. Despite ruling the largest and most unified empire of his time, the first emperor lived in profound solitude. He never officially appointed a primary empress for the empire. No court official or noble ever gained his full personal confidence. All people serving him acted out of duty and national discipline, rather than personal closeness or intimate bond. Chapter 6: Death, Treason, and the Fast Collapse of the Qin Dynasty. In 210 BCE, Qin Shi Huang fell gravely ill during a long cross-country inspection tour. Sensing his end drawing near, he wrote his final royal edict. He ordered his eldest son, Fusu, wise, gentle, and highly capable, to return to the capital and inherit the throne. This last vital will was never fulfilled. Two powerful men plotted high treason: the royal eunuch Zhao and Prime Minister Li Si. Li Si's motive was pure self-preservation. He feared Fusu would favor his famous general Meng Tian and strip Li Si of all political power the second he became emperor. Together, Zhao Gao and Li Si secretly altered the imperial decree. They installed Hu Hai, the emperor's weak, foolish younger son, as the new ruler. The loyal prince Fusu was forced to commit suicide far from the palace. The emperor's sudden death was hidden from all citizens of the empire. His decaying corpse traveled thousands of miles back to the capital in secret. Rotten fish were placed beside his carriage to cover the terrible stench of his rotting body. The man who once controlled every law, every army, and every inch of his nation lost all power the exact second he drew his last breath. The new emperor Hu Hai was incompetent, corrupt, and crueler than his father. Taxes and forced labor grew far worse than before. Mass peasant uprisings exploded in every region of the realm. Only 3 years after Qin Shi Huang's death, the entire Qin dynasty crumbled completely to the ground. All the unity he spent a lifetime fighting for vanished overnight. Chapter 7: Final Reflection: The Greatest Tragedy of Qin Shi Huang. So how should modern global history judge Qin Shi Huang? Was he a heartless tyrant who exploited millions of working people for his own grand ambitions? or a brilliant revolutionary whose reforms allowed China to remain a unified cultural land for thousands of years? The truth is simple. He carried both identities within one single life. Without his brutal unification wars, ancient China would likely have stayed permanently split into competing small states. Without his standardized systems, shared Chinese culture, writing and identity could never have fully formed. Yet his harsh, unforgiving policies brought unbearable suffering to ordinary people living under his reign. His short-lived dynasty paid the terrible price for his ruthless, extreme methods. In the end, Qin Shi Huang achieved every single goal he chased for decades. He seized absolute royal power. He united a fractured continent, torn apart by centuries of war. He built governing systems that survived more than 2,000 years. But he never gained genuine trust from another human being. He never found inner peace. He never discovered the immortality he desperately craved his whole later life. He constructed massive stone walls to block foreign enemies outside his borders. But he could never lock away the endless loneliness, trapped deep inside his heart. That lifelong isolation, born from childhood betrayal, reinforced by every political massacre he ordered, became the greatest tragedy of his legendary, deeply divisive life. Now I want to hear your honest opinion down below in the comments. Do you view Qin Shi Huang more as a unifying visionary or a cruel tyrant? Could ancient Chinese civilization exist in its known form without his harsh, violent reforms? Do you believe Han Dynasty historians twisted old records to justify overthrowing the brutal Qin regime? If you enjoy deep, complete breakdowns of ancient Chinese emperors, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more full-length history documentaries. Next episode, we will break down the full tragic story of Li Si, the prime minister who betrayed the first emperor and sealed the fatal fate of the Qin dynasty.